الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. Today inshallah we will take a one-day break from our tafsir and we will talk about something else, something important and something that many of you have requested that we speak about. This is the topic of zakat and who and when who it is obligatory to give zakat on, and where can zakat be given, what are the amounts that zakat is due and obligatory upon. These are all things that every Muslim should know, right? Because zakat is an obligation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's one of the pillars of Islam. And it's important to be somewhat familiar with the rulings concerning zakat. Now, of course, I don't expect that everybody sitting over here will become an expert in zakat, right? That's what your scholars are for. But you should be somewhat familiar with the rulings concerning zakat, because zakat is something that the majority of us, we at least, even if not now, then at some point in your life, inshallah, you must give zakat. So how much zakat is due on you on an annual basis, and what are the types of wealth that zakat is due upon? This is something it's important to educate yourself regarding this, so that you make the correct calculations when discharging of this obligation, right? So the very first thing you must understand is, who is zakat obligatory upon? Most people, when they begin for the first time earning an income of their in your life, or a time in your life where you become the owner of what we call nisab. Nisab is the threshold, the minimum threshold that one needs to meet in order for the obligation of zakat to become incumbent upon that person. So the nisab, there are two nisabs that we find in the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and because the universal currencies in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they were gold and silver, right? Even until relatively recently, every world currency was backed by gold, right? So we can thank our friend Nixon for that, who removed the backing of gold from the greenback, from the U.S. currency. And today the majority of the world's currencies are not actually backed by gold. They're backed by the It's interesting how the world's currencies work, right? The world's currencies are sort of propped up by the US dollar, and the US dollar is pretty much not worth the paper it's written on, right? But nonetheless, it's money that we assign value to, so therefore zakat is going to become obligatory. But the two universal currencies in the time of the Prophet ﷺ were gold and silver. So therefore we have a nisab of silver and we have a nisab of gold, right? However, in the modern context, the scholars, they usually defer to the nisab of gold and not that of silver, because the nisab of silver is equivalent to something like, close to about $600, right? So somebody who has $600, they probably can't, just $600, probably can't even pay that month's rent, right? So that's not regarded in our context as a wealthy person, somebody who has just $600, right? So therefore, we usually defer to the gold nisab, which is about 87.4 grams of gold, or its equivalent in any other in any other liquid asset, right? Whether it be cash or stock in trade, or just anything else that is treated as a commodity, right? Not something that you use, but treated as a fluid asset of yours. So this is 87.4 grams of gold, is equivalent to roughly about $4,800, as of, I believe I checked this about 2 weeks ago. So, it's going to change every day, but nowadays, roughly about $4,800. So now the first time in your life that you become the owner of $4,800, or whatever is the equivalent of 87.4 grams of gold, is the day that the Sharia now considers you as a wealthy person, right? So, for the first time in your life, you have this money in your bank account, $4,800, or whatever the equivalent of 87.4 grams of gold is. Now, from that day until the completion of one lunar Islamic year. So let's say, for the sake of example, in the year 1439, that's last year, on the 1st of Ramadan was the first time in your life that you ever had $4,800 in your bank account, right? In excess of all of your immediate liabilities. So, right, after you pay your phone bill and your internet bill and your rent and, whatever else it is that you need to pay for that month, you still have in your bank account $4,800 or more, right? Congratulations. The Sharia now defines you as a wealthy person, right? Now, from this day until the 1st of Ramadan in 1440, right? This is your zakat anniversary. So you don't have to give zakat on the 1st of Ramadan, the first time you have this money, but you need to keep you need to keep a record of this. And the next year on that same date, right, you must look at whether or not you still have in excess of the nisab, $4,800, or it's whatever the equivalent is in the following year. And if you do, in excess of your immediate liabilities, and we'll talk about liabilities in a moment, then this is the year that you now must give zakat. So your total value of all of the fluid assets that you own. So fluid assets are things like stock, in trade, so the market value of your investments, your actual cash. For women, this includes the value of gold and silver jewelry. This doesn't include the value of other types of jewelry. This doesn't include the value of things like your home and your car and whatever other things that you have lying around in your closet or wherever. So these things are not zakatable assets, right? So it's for the most part, for most regular people, it's just going to be cash, gold and silver, and perhaps if you have investments, then those, right? So for most average people, this is the areas that zakat is going to become applicable on, and you are obliged now to give 2.5% of this wealth for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to those who are deserving of this wealth, right? So this is pretty much straightforward. Now, most people have this question that I can't remember the exact day that I became the owner of the nisab, right? So if you can't remember the exact day, then it is permissible for you to arbitrarily choose a day. So let's say, you choose the 1st of Ramadan, or you choose the 1st of Muharram, and ensure that the day that you're choosing corresponds to the Islamic date and not the Gregorian date, because as you know that our calendars differ by about 11 days on an annual basis, right? So therefore, your zakat calculations are not going to be accurate if you're giving your zakat based on the popular Gregorian calendar. Rather, you must adhere to the lunar Islamic calendar in this regard, right? So arbitrarily choose a day, choose the 1st of Ramadan, the 15th of Ramadan, but choose one day, right? You can't keep changing every single year, and every year on that day, that's like your tax day, that's your zakat day, that's the day that you're going to calculate your zakat, and you don't have to give it immediately, but you must calculate it immediately on that day, right? You must calculate your zakat on that day, and depending on whether or not you can find a recipient. So let's say somebody owes $1,500 in zakat, right? So it's not necessary that they immediately give this $1,500 to those who deserve it, but they must calculate this, and they can give it over a period of time if they would like as well. Many people, they have this question that we have poor relatives back home, And it's permissible for you, in fact not permissible, it's encouraged for you that if you have deserving family members, to first give your zakat to them. The only people in your family that are not eligible to receive your zakat are your father and mother, as well as your grandfather, grandmother, great-grandfather, great-grandmother, these individuals, as well as your children and grandchildren, and if you have them, great-grandchildren. So your, we call them usul and furu', the branches as well as the roots, right? So you can't give to the chain above, you can't give to your parents and your grandparents, as well as your children and your grandchildren. Everybody else, your brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, distant cousins, they're all eligible to receive zakat so long as they fulfill the criteria. And in fact, these people are more deserving of your zakat if they are in fact in need than any other cause, right? So it's so now the question is, many people have this question that we feel that if we give them a lump sum, so I have $1,500 of zakat that I must give this year. If I give it all right now, then a couple of months later, the request is going to come again that we need some money, and can you give us some more zakat? And of course you don't have any more zakat at that time. So it is permissible for you to sort of pay this zakat to them in installments. So let's say a couple of $100 every month. That is indeed permissible. There is nothing wrong with that, inshallah, right? So you understand how the anniversary works, right? That every year on that same date, if you are still in possession of excess wealth above and beyond the nisab, after deducting your liabilities, then you must give zakat on that year, right? Regardless of what happens in the middle of the year, right? So in the middle of the year, you could dip below the threshold of nisab, and you could come back up, and you could come back down. It really doesn't matter, as long as on the day on your anniversary, you still have in excess of the nisab, you still must give zakat for that year. Now, I mentioned a few times over here that you are allowed to deduct your immediate liabilities from your zakat calculation. So how do we define immediate liabilities when it comes to zakat? So anything that is due within the next 12 months, right? And these are things that are not potential liabilities, but actual liabilities, things that are due in the next 12 months. So, if you have it in the back of your mind that you want to take, a vacation this summer, and you're going to spend $10,000 on that vacation, this is not an actual liability until you actually go and take that vacation. Therefore, when you're calculating your zakat, you can't deduct $10,000, right? You understand this. But actual liabilities, so for example, if you have a loan that you are repaying in installments, so the installments for the next 12 months, absolutely, these are actual liabilities. There's no way to get around them. These are things that are already due on your part. You may absolutely deduct this from your zakat expenses, as well as now, without getting into the discussion of whether or not you should have a mortgage, but if you do have a mortgage, then it is permissible for you to deduct the payments that you intend to make for the next 12 consecutive months, right? Whether these are the minimum due payments on your part, or whether this is something that you intend to contribute above and beyond what is actually due upon you, it is permissible for you to deduct this from your next 12 months expenses, right? Things like, now it's not permissible for you to deduct future bills, right? So like, I don't know, my internet bill for the next 12 months, right? You can't do that because this is actually not due on your part yet, right? My phone bill for the next 12 months. Can't do that because this is actually not due on your part yet. Your rent for the next 12 months, if you reasonably intend to actually live in the same place that you're living for the next 12 months, then yes, you may deduct your rent as well, because this is something that is due upon you on a monthly basis without without any question, right? So these are your immediate liabilities, and they're not necessarily always going to be bills, right? If liabilities could include other things as well, right? So if you're divorced and you have to give your ex-wife something every month, so this is an actual liability that is already there. So you can deduct your alimony and child support payments for the next 12 months as well, right? And again, the sisters, according to the Sharia, once you are divorced, it is not permissible for you to continue taking alimony from your husbands, right? Child support is a different issue that requires a little bit of detail, but alimony is not permissible from the Sharia point of view, right? Because once people are divorced, they are divorced. It's no longer your ex-husband's job to support you once you are no longer his wife, right? But we're just talking about zakat, right? We're talking about zakat over here. So if you happen to find yourself in that position, that's also a liability. You can deduct that from your zakat as well, right? So these are the liabilities that it's permissible for you to deduct from your zakat calculations. Everything else you must give zakat on, right? At a rate of 2.5%. Now, some people have other interesting questions with regards to some of the vehicles that we have at our access, for our comfort and just for our tax saving purposes. Sometimes for our retirement planning purposes. Sometimes for the purposes of planning our children's education. We have different avenues that are at our disposal. So, how is zakat applicable on these things? So the most popular amongst them first would be the RRSP. So the RRSP is a registered retirement savings plan. It's a plan from the federal government. Basically, the idea is that if you're making a higher income while you're still working right now, then you can contribute a portion of that income to your RRSP. What this is going to do for you is this is going to deduct your taxable income for the year, and it's also going to, and if you have no idea how an RRSP works and you don't have one, you can just ignore the next 5 minutes, inshallah, right? So don't get confused. But if you do, you need to pay attention. So the purpose of the RRSP is going to lower your tax bracket. It's also it's an incentive for the government. They have money that they can use. So basically, the thing that happens with the RRSP is that you are incentivized not to withdraw from your RRSP prior to retirement. Because if let's say you are not yet retired and you have $60,000 sitting in your RRSP and you want to, you want to do something with it, right? You want to buy a really nice car. So you decide that you want to withdraw $20,000 from your RRSP. What's going to happen is if you have not yet retired, two things are going to happen, right? You're going to be hit with an immediate penalty for withdrawing before the time you should be withdrawing. And the second is that $20,000 is going to be added to your taxable income for the current year, right? So basically, you're going to be penalized for withdrawing from your RRSP prior to the time when the government really wants you to withdraw from your RRSP, right? So how is zakat applicable on the RRSP, right? Now, keep in mind that there are multiple opinions in this regard. However, for lack of time, I'm going to give you just my own opinion with regards to how zakat is applicable on an RRSP. In my humble opinion, zakat is applicable on the total value of your RRSP. This includes all of your own contributions, as well as just the value of stocks in trade, the value of profits from investments that have been sold, as well as any dividends that were generated in the last year, right? So all of these things. The only thing that is not zakatable, so depending on how your RRSP is managed and how actively it's managed, there is a potential that sometimes they're just due to funds lying around for for an extended period of time in your RRSP, they could accumulate some interest, right? So if interest is accumulated in your RRSP, then this is not zakatable. You are to dispose of this interest. You can't use it. But everything else in its totality is zakatable. You must give zakat on the total value, right? Now, some people present a counter argument to this, that you currently don't have access to your RRSP, right? Because you're still working, you're not yet retired. However, this argument is not entirely true, right? So for this argument to be true, it must be constant that you absolutely have no way of withdrawing from your RRSP. Sure, you'll be penalized for withdrawing from your RRSP, but you can still, at the end of the day, withdraw from it. It's not like somebody has barred you from your money, right? So there will be repercussions, but it's not that you just can't flat out withdraw from your RRSP. Therefore, in my humble opinion, that this argument does not hold, right? So because the reason that people present this argument is that there are rulings concerning wealth that you don't have access to, right? So whether this is a bad debt, so you loan somebody money and every time you ask that guy to repay you, he says, what money? You never gave me anything, right? Prove it, right? So now this person is not acknowledging the debt. You have no way to get this person to pay. So basically, this is money that you don't have access to. So you can write this off, and you don't have to continue paying zakat on there. So therefore, people liken the RRSP to this. This is money that I don't have access to. However, you do have access to the money. You will be penalized if you access it, but you do, at the end of the day, have access to the money. Therefore, I believe that the RRSP is zakatable in total. So the total value of your contributions, as well as any any dividends that are being generated, the value of stocks in trade or any other investments that are active, as well as any profits that have accumulated over the years from the sale of the investments, right? So all of this in its totality is zakatable. And however, even in my opinion, you do have the option of calculating your zakat on an annual basis and then deferring to when you do have access to that money, right? But however, it is necessary that you calculate your zakat on an annual basis. So this is the gist of your RRSP. If you have any other questions, you can ask me later. The second popular vehicle is the RESP. So the idea behind the RESP is this is a registered education savings plan. This is for your children to go to college. The idea over here is that you make a contribution, the government matches the contribution. The funds that are sitting in your RESP, they can also be invested and reinvested to generate more of an income. So as far as RESPs are concerned, they're a little bit different than RRSPs in the fact that, in my opinion, zakat is only applicable on your contribution as well as any profit or any profit from investments that have been sold, or any dividends that you receive in your RESP from the stocks and from the investments that you own. So all of this is zakatable, but the government portion is not zakatable. And the reason for this is, let's say your child becomes 18 and they decide that they don't want to go to college, right? They just want to sit in your basement and just watch TV, right? So the government is not going to give you that money that it has contributed over the years unless your children actually go to college, right? So therefore, you don't actually own that money until your children actually enroll in some sort of a post-secondary education, right? So therefore, if that money is not yours, it's not zakatable. But all of the other money, right, your contributions as well as any profits earned in that RESP, that is your money, right? And some people, they to get away from paying zakat in the RESP, they say, well, this is not my money, it's my kid's money, right? Well, no, it's not your kid's money, right? Because if your child decides that he doesn't want to go to college, right? So who's going to get that money back? Is it going to be you, or is it going to be your child? It's not going to be your child, it's going to be you. So it is your money, it's not your child's money, right? So therefore, don't play games with zakat. That is, zakat is due on the RESP for the portion that you contribute, as well as any profit, any dividends, any stocks, for the market value of stocks and investments that are currently in trade, right? So you understand the RESP. What else is there, right? We're not Americans, so we're not going to talk about 401ks. Our equivalent is the RRSP. Savings accounts, these are much more straightforward. Even if it's a tax-free savings account, it's still zakatable. It's still your money. You still must give zakat on that money. However, a savings account, sometimes just due to a variety of reasons, it makes more financial sense for you to have a savings account over a checking account. But the problem with the savings account is it does accumulate some interest. So the ruling with regards to that interest is, if you must have a savings account, then you are to dispose of that interest on an annual basis, right? And how you dispose of it, now people also, they make this excuse, Sheikh, how can I keep track of it, right? So if you're smart enough to have a savings account, then you're smart enough to be able to go to the bank and ask for a statement with regards to how much interest exists in that account of yours, right? So you take that statement, you look at how much interest is present, and you discard it. How you discard it is you withdraw it, right? Or if you don't want to withdraw it from there, you can withdraw it from, you can just give, money is money, right? So you can give it from any other money that you have, the equivalent amount. And the way you discard it is you can give it in charity, except to the masjid. You cannot give interest to the masjid, but you can give it to another deserving person in charity, without the intention of reward, right? Without the intention of reward. You can't say that, may Allah reward me, I'm giving this $5,000 of interest to this individual over here, right? Interest is dirty money. You can't have the intention of reward for giving somebody interest. You can also use interest to fund public infrastructure projects, again, excluding the masjid. So, things like building roads, or, building a public bathroom or some other public service. Now, most of the time they don't accept donations for these sorts of things in Western countries. That's what we have tax for. But that's you can do this back home in whichever country that you come from. So you can build a home for somebody, or you can fund. If there are no real roads in some village or something, you can fund that. You can fund the construction of a well or a dam or whatever it is that you want to do. That's fine, right? Public infrastructure, again, without the intention of earning any reward. So these are some of the basics of your zakat calculations on an annual basis. Of course, that everybody's situation is a little bit different. So if you have additional questions pertaining to your situation, I suggest that you get in touch with a scholar who is aware of the ground realities over here in the West, right? So with all due respect to the scholars in every country. So for example, if you call up some sheikh or some Maulana in India or Pakistan or wherever it is, and you say that, Sheikh, how am I supposed to give zakat on my RRSP, right? Now, how logically is that person supposed to know how an RRSP works if he doesn't live here, right? So you're putting that person in an unfair situation, right? And then when he gives you an answer that doesn't make sense to you, then you're going to make fun of him that he doesn't understand how the world works, right? No, you don't understand how the world works, because you're asking somebody who will have no idea how this works to give you advice on how to give zakat on that, right? So you have an abundance of scholars that are present here locally. Ask them, and they will, because they know how these things work. They know how zakat is applicable on this. And we didn't touch on something that's a lot more detailed. In fact, that's why I didn't talk about it. Is zakat on investment portfolios, right? So that's a whole other can of worms. So it requires a lot more detail. It's much easier understood if I actually show you things on a screen, which I don't have access to inside the masjid right now. So we will save that for another time, right? But that for the most part, I think we've covered our bases. So zakat on three of the most popular avenues of saving money that people have access to. We've covered that as well, and we will talk about investment portfolios at another time, inshallah, right? Because that, and not during Ramadan, we don't have time to do this during Ramadan, and it's going to put a lot of people to sleep, right? Especially if you don't have an investment portfolio, it's going to be really boring to hear about percentages and just the current fixed assets as well as the assets that are fluid and the likes, right? So if you don't, these are the things that we look at when giving zakat on individual investments. So if you don't need to know, you don't need to know. But if you do need to know, you need to know, right? So we can do that at some other time, inshallah. We have about 10 minutes left until the time of iftar, and we can use this time to sit outside and make dua, inshallah.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Inshallah, the Iqamah will be in 5 minutes.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
Please straighten your rows, make sure your heels are on the line, stand shoulder to shoulder. Allahu Akbar. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. ألم تر كيف فعل ربك بأصحاب الفيل ألم يجعل كيدهم في تضليل وأرسل عليهم طيرا أبابيل ترميهم بحجارة من سجيل فجعلهم كعصف مأكول. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر.